franktalks.com.
This program does not represent the views of this station and may be considered offensive to some listeners. This program may contain mature subject matter, including frank discussions of controversial topics. It is intended for mature, open-minded audiences. Discretion is highly advised. This program is entirely independently produced by and is copyrighted by Frank. It is broadcast here under license.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles. I'm Frank, because I have to be. We have an amazing guest for you, someone who is amazing enough to come into studio and share a little bit with us, maybe dispel a few myths and share the secret lives of people who work in the sex industry. And with that said, let us go to our guest. Her name is Ronnie NaughtyLady, and she is a professional escort. And on today's show, we're going to find out a little bit about her and the lifestyle of someone who works in the sex industry. Welcome to our studios, Ronnie NaughtyLady.
Well, thanks, Frank.
It's really great to have you here. I'd like to get right into the interview. Let's start off with your personal history. There's such a stigma attached to people who work in the sex industry that I'd really like to just find out some basic information about you, where you were born, where you grew up, anything about you as a person.
Well, I was born here in Montreal. I grew up in the suburbs, had a pretty normal childhood. Parents divorced when I was in elementary school, just like most of my friends. Went to high school, cégep, university. Pretty normal life.
And can you start us off from the time that you were in the, I don't know what better term we could call it, the normal workforce, and then made the transition from that workforce into the sex trade?
Well, I had a successful career in sales. I was doing quite well. I would work 10 years at the same place, putting in 40 to 60-hour weeks, and I suffered a job burnout and went on unemployment. The unemployment ran out, and I was far from ready to go back to work. Went on welfare for 2 months and discovered there was way too much month at the end of the money. And so even though I wasn't up to working, and my doctor agreed I wasn't really up to working, the stress of not having enough income to live off of wasn't doing me any good either. So I went back to work. I got fired from 4 jobs in 1 year. Bosses don't seem to appreciate the need for an afternoon nap. After that, I was eligible for unemployment again. Went back on unemployment. This time when unemployment was running out, again, I wasn't ready to go back to work. I was still very tired, very weak, very stressed, and just not ready. I was still burnt out. And I realized I was about to get onto this really vicious circle. And I answered an ad in the back of the Mirror for one of those live sex chat hostesses. And I figured, what am I doing at home? I'm listening to the radio, fooling around on the computer, reading, napping, masturbating. I could get paid to do that. And even with 4 computers in front of me, sometimes it would be over an hour and nobody logs on. So I had nap time. And so suffering from burnout and needing to work, it was pretty much the ideal job for me at the time. After about 8 months, something like that, I was feeling a lot better. During that time, while farting on the computer one day, I found a book called A Guide to Sex Work for the Interested and the Intrigued. And there was a chapter on live internet. So I thought this could be an interesting book for me to read. So I bought the book. And there was a more interesting chapter I found out when I bought the book. It was about escorting. And I said, I could do that. And broke a lot of ideas that I had in my head prior to starting, Wow, you mean I don't have to look like a model? There's a lot of little ideas like that I had in my mind, so I called a few agencies, started working as an escort.
And how was the transition from working, just for the benefit of our listeners who maybe aren't aware, let's start first. What is the setup for the type of work you did over the internet?
I was working, it was like a chat line. I had worked in a studio. I had 4 computers in front of me, 4 different names. People could log on to my room. They could chat with me without seeing me for free. But if they wanted to see me, they would have to pay.
And then let's say they actually wanted to see you, they paid, what would happen?
Well, usually they would tell me what they wanted to see, and usually I would, it's various forms of masturbation, getting undressed, posing. A lot of the men would get quite rude on the phone. They would, log on, "Hey, bitch, I'm coming in your room. You better be undressed." And it was like, I didn't really like being talked to like that. But at the time, I was getting paid, I think, $12 an hour, and it was the best money I was making by the end of, 4 jobs in 1 year. Each job I was making progressively less, and wasn't too good for the self-esteem, but at the same time, I was making enough money to pay the rent.
And how is that different to the way you're treated now as a professional escort?
I get treated only with respect. I meet some wonderful gentlemen, and I'm choosing the word gentleman because that is the way they behave, and I'm being treated like a respectfully, like a lady.
Now, if I understand this correctly, there's an image that girls who are working as professional escorts are regularly abused. They don't have very much say as to what goes on. How do you feel about those myths, and can you tell us whether or not they're accurate?
There are... Well, how I work as an independent, I have 100% say what goes on, and I never, ever do anything I don't want to do. And when I was working, the agencies I worked for, I never had to do anything I did not want to do. That's one of the really great things about this job. There's not too many jobs where, I don't feel like doing that, I'm not going to do it. Your boss is going to say, "Okay, I understand." There are circumstances, not all pimps are bad. But there are some who do beat their girls, the ones who stereotypes are based on a grain of truth. And there are some who are like that. Okay.
And on that topic, I think the next logical question would be, do you have a pimp?
No, I work completely independently. I don't have a pimp. I don't have a manager. I work entirely for myself. There's nobody who forces me to work, and nobody who takes any of my cash after I've worked. I'm totally independent.
You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles. We're in studio talking with Ronnie NaughtyLady, who is a professional escort and is giving us a little window into the world of professional escorts. We're going to be going to some music now, and after that tongue twisted again. I hate
it's
when
my
that
sexy body sitting in front of you that's doing it, isn't it?
Not just your body, your entire aura is absolutely divine. As per usual, here on Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by From Loser to Seducer by Frank B. Kermit. Ladies, is there a man in your life that got dumped for being clingy, needy, or was told he was a loser, but you still think he's a nice guy and want to help him? He could be a relative or even a friend, and you know he needs the help. Do you want to be the one to give him the gift that will change his life forever? How about the gift of a great biography? Buy him the book, From Loser to Seducer by Frank B. Kermit. It is the story of a nice guy who triumphs over his inner demons to find his own hidden power. Help the nice guy in your life discover his inner seducer to find his soulmate. Buy this book now at franktalks.com.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. What would your life be like if you knew exactly what to say and do with women? This book is for the guy that simply wants to learn how to handle women's tests by addressing her emotional needs. By this, you create the type of attraction that will make her see you as the one she was destined to be with. This book will teach you how to get the woman you want and how to keep her. Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test is the Rosetta Stone for men to understand exactly what a woman means when she speaks and how to respond. Is that worth changing your life forever? Buy this book at franktalks.com now.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the Adult Male Virgin Seminar and Telephone Consultations. Ladies, is your boyfriend an adult male virgin? Is he so shy and insecure that you need to take the initiative, but you really wish he would just be the man and take the lead? Does he think holding hands and sweet cheek kisses is fulfilling? Does he think the G-Spot is the name of a new club? Ladies, if his idea of a night of fun means you get to be player number 2 in his latest video game, then get him the gift that will give you both pleasure. The Adult Male Virgin Seminar and Telephone Consultations. Only available at franktalks.com. Frank helps adult boys become men.
You're listening to Frank Talks, Pleasures, and Lifestyles. And I'm Frank because I have to be. Let's get back to our guest, the lovely Miss Ronnie NaughtyLady, professional escort. Welcome back to studio.
Thank you.
All right, let's change the direction of this interview. And I'd like to talk to you now about A Night with Ronnie. Somebody's listening right now who might want to be a client of yours in the future. They call you up. What can they expect?
Well, most of my clients will contact me by email first. The vast majority are businessmen from out of town who are arranging their time in Montreal. So we'll email each other back and forth. They'll tell me what they're looking for, their wants, their needs, desires, and assuming that I can accommodate, and then we agree upon an amount of time, place, fix up a date. From there, very little is typical. Some people rather take me out for dinner first and make it a full evening, have me sleep over the night. Other people, they just want to get together for a couple of hours. What happens during that time, there's nothing typical. It's different. Everybody's different. Everybody's wants are different.
What would you say is a common thread amongst the majority of your clients?
They're lonely and sex-starved for the most part. Not everybody could admit it. In fact, I suspect some would even be insulted that to be classified as sex-starved. Not sex-starved, touch-starved. Let me correct myself. Touch-starved, because we live in a very touch-starved society, with the threat of sexual harassment and stuff like that. People are afraid to touch. You don't get once upon a time and at work you might actually get a physical pat on the back, and that's totally unheard of now. You just don't do that. You might have somebody put their hand on your shoulder at work. It just won't happen anymore, though. Those things have gone to the way of the 50s. We live in a very, very touch-isolated world right now in North America. In the Middle East, two men who are friends, it's normal for them to hold hands or maybe walk down the street with their arms on each other's shoulder. in North America, you'd be pegged as a homosexual couple, and for a lot of people, they really wouldn't want to be pegged that way.
What other common elements among your clients can we find other than the fact that they're a touch star? For example, how without sounding too materialistic here, how good looking are your clients?
For the most part, they're pretty good looking. I mean, there's some people who I'm less attracted to than others, and some people I'm more attracted to, but for the most part, they're good looking gentlemen.
And for those that are not that attractive, how do you function?
Everybody has something attractive about them. Some people have to look a little bit longer.
Let's get to a couple of more intriguing questions. Has it ever happened to you where you get a call, you go to meet a client, and it turns out to be someone you knew?
That hasn't happened to me personally, though I do know a few other working girls where it has happened to, and it can be very awkward, but it doesn't usually pose a problem.
And when it comes to the level of experience for some of your clients, have you ever taken any of their virginities?
Several. Some people tell me up front that it's their first time, and I remember one gentleman, he didn't tell me. I had to figure that much out myself. He had booked me for a 3-hour date. He wanted it not to feel rushed, things to be comfortable, and we started off just sitting there. We had a glass of wine and we're talking, and the first thing that I thought was a little weird, he sat across from me on the chair, because there was like a couch and a chair in the room, and rather than sitting beside me. I found that a little bit unusual, and eventually I figured it out. I just came right out and asked him, and he blushed and told me yes, and so I turned on some music and we started. I decided to start with some dancing, just slowly touching and getting more comfortable physically with each other. And it's much easier if I know up front, though, because I don't read minds. I flunked mind reading, actually.
You did?
Yes.
Well, where were you taking that course?
I think they dropped it at Cégep
Did
because
they?
too many people were failing the course.
Well, that would be a course I would just love to get the reading list to.
Well, no, then you would just use your telepathic powers for.
Well, that's right. So I don't even need to take the course. I'm already a mind reader. I just don't know how to read minds yet. Let's ask you another question here. What are some of the pleasures you experience in this lifestyle? After all, the title of this show is Pleasures and Lifestyles.
Well, I've spent my whole career prior to this in sales, and I've got to say that it's probably the most honest job I've ever had. I'm not saying that I lied as a salesperson, but there's times where I was encouraged by my bosses to not say anything unless it was asked. For example, to encourage people to, for example, come back. I worked in a car dealership, to come back there for the maintenance when I knew very well that, depending what's going on, they probably could do the same thing at their local garage for a lot less money. Stuff like that, to me, is dishonest. It's not that I was lying, it's that I didn't say anything. And this is probably the most honest profession I've ever had. I like the fact that I work when I want. I was recovering from burnout, so working crazy long hours. Now, if I feel the need to sleep, I sleep. I sleep in as late as necessary. I remember a lot of times I'd go into work with a cold and a low-grade fever, and it was perfectly normal. Everybody did that. Now, if I wake up and I just feel like I might be coming down with something, I'll cancel any appointments I might have for that day and take care of myself. And I've made a discovery. If you do that, you can pretty well get well in one day, whereas pushing yourself to go to work even though you're sick. You tend to have a cold that lasts a week or longer.
In terms of canceling your appointments, you had told me before the actual show that you used to work with an agency. Now you're independent. How many clients can you, or did you have in a given evening, as to how many you have in a given evening now?
The most I ever saw in one day was 4. And for me, that's a lot. As I like to go home and shower in between, change my clothes, rest, eat. I like each day to be a separate experience. You wake up in the morning, that's 1 shower, 4 dates, 4 more showers. How many times can you get washed in a day? I'm probably one of the cleanest people in the city.
Actually, that brings us to another question here. When you are with more than one client in a given evening or during a given day, how do you maintain your body? I mean, your body must either be in pain or exhausted.
If I'm too tired to see somebody else, then I won't. Remember, I'm my own boss now, and I don't have to do anything I don't want to do, ever. What's also interesting, and was probably one of the most surprising things for me when I got into this business, was most of the time I spend with a client is not having actual sex. Touching, cuddling, talking, could be a lot of things, but actual sex, no. And when we are having sex, a lot of times it's not intercourse. It could be oral sex or I have some pretty fancy hand job techniques.
Let's focus on a different aspect here, an aspect that I don't think gets talked very much about, the relationship you have with your clients. In a private conversation, you once mentioned to me that your clients will talk to you about things and in ways that they cannot express with anyone else. And I'd really like to elaborate on the type of bond you have with your clients.
That's definitely true with a lot of them. As a sex worker, you have to be a good listener. You're a lot of things to your clients. You're their friend, you're their lover, you're their therapist, you're their mother, you're their comfort, you're a lot of things. Consultant. So I've had people, I have one client, I was telling you about him off air before. His wife is going through menopause, and she's going through the full mood swing thing, and he's got a teenage daughter, and sometimes those mood swings, one day he called me, he goes, "I have to see you today." And we got together, and he was just so upset. He came home, and to him, he felt like they both hated him. He walked in, and they just were both blew up at him, and all he did was walk in the door. And I was basically explaining to him that, menopause is an upheaval of hormones. It was something he didn't really understand. And I reminded him what it was like when he was a teenager, and he'd wake up and just hate the whole world. And that was hormones that do that to you. And so he's got 2 people in his house going through the same thing. It helped him, understand a little bit better what was going on and try not to take it so personally. And also, these are events to me. He can't tell his best friend about this. His best friend doesn't care. He's not going to tell anybody else about it. He certainly can't speak to his wife about it. There's not too many people he feels that he can talk to about these things as openly as me.
And on that note, we're going to be going to some music here on Frank Talks, Pleasures and Lifestyles.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the Personalized Symbolic Peacocking Seminar. Guys, do you think that your father has a great sense of style? Are blue jeans and a clean t-shirt your idea of dressy? Then you need the Personalized Symbolic Peacocking Seminar. Does 1982 live in your closet? Do you own clothes that have more holes in them than a slice of Swiss cheese? then you need the Personalized Symbolic Peacocking Seminar. Look at the contents of your closet. If you think that navy blue and dark green are your colorful clothes, then you need the Personalized Symbolic Peacocking Seminar. When you pick up your date for that night out on the town, does she cringe at your wardrobe? If you think that ladies might wonder if you're colorblind, or if your girlfriend has to remind you to wear a clean item of clothing, then you definitely need the Personalized Symbolic Peacocking Seminar. The Personalized Symbolic Peacocking Seminar and telephone consultations, only available at franktalks.com.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the book I'm a Man, That's My Job, The Philosophy of a Seducer. What is inner game? There's a lot of contradictory information out there, and one size does not fit all. Your inner game is as unique and personal as your signature or your fingerprints. This book provides you with the means to create your own seduction persona. This is a workbook, which means we will work together, and by the end, you will have developed your own personal inner game. By this, learn what it means to be a man and what the role of the modern man in today's society is that will attract him to the woman he wants. Learn about how men and women think differently and how to take the lead in a relationship. This book is for you at franktalks.com.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. Ladies, does your man squash your inner vixen? When you ask him to repeat what you have just said to him, does he look at you like a deer caught in the headlights? Does he think that leaving the game on while you talk to him is a good idea? Is his favorite phrase, "Yes, dear, you are absolutely right"? Does wife or girlfriend mean boring and dull to him? Ladies, don't you wish that he knows what you mean when you ask him if you look fat? Then you need to buy him the book Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. On sale now at franktalks.com.
You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles. And I'm Frank because I have to be. We're continuing on with our interview with Ronnie NaughtyLady, a professional escort. Welcome back to studio, Ronnie.
Thank you.
We're going to be changing the direction of this interview yet again. Let's start off with your relationship. You are involved with a certain gentleman. How long have the two of you been together?
We've been living together for about 2 years now.
And he's more than aware of...
Oh, definitely. I discussed getting into this business with him at length before I ever started.
And how do you manage your relationship with him and the type of work you do? Isn't there any issue of jealousy that ever comes up?
I'm going to give you an example that should help clarify how I separate things. Imagine your mother reaches over and brushes her hand gently on your cheek. Now that evokes a certain set of feelings.
Of course.
Okay, now imagine your lover reaches over and brushes her hand gently on your cheek. That evokes a completely different set of feelings. I hope.
In my case, absolutely, definitely.
That's pretty well how it gets separated. It's not they can touch me the exact same way, but it's not the same.
So in your mind, there's definitely a difference there. You don't ever get confused.
No.
Fair enough. Another question. If you knew that a girl was looking to get into the sex industry, whether it's internet chat rooms, working through an agency, or following in your footsteps, which would be working as an independent, what advice could you offer her? And bear in mind that we might have somebody listening right now who wants to get into the sex industry, or is maybe even thinking about doing some of the things you've already done. What advice would you have wanted to have when you first got into it that you could offer someone now?
Well, the first thing I would point out, and I think especially with the younger girls, they forget the importance. It's going to follow you. You will always have this on your past. And it's not an easy business to get out of because it's so stigmatized. You could be perfectly comfortable with it, but what are you going to put on your resume when you're applying for a different job? And how will people treat you because of that? So you have to remember it's going to follow you. And you might be able to hide it for so much time, but eventually, although, like I said, it hasn't happened to me yet, I'm expecting it to happen eventually, that I'm going to run into somebody I know. It's only normal. And, once I'm out of it, I could be going to apply for a job one day, and it turns out my prospective boss was one of my customers. That, there's a lot of awkward situations that can come up from it. And I think that's really important to remember. Sex work is a crash course in assertiveness training. You have to be. You have to be able to draw the line yourself. Because if you don't respect your limits, nobody else will. And so you really have to be able to stand up for yourself. I also think it's very important, the obvious, you got to be comfortable with yourself. You got to be comfortable naked. You have to be comfortable with sex. A little test you might want to do for yourself is next time you're on the bus, look around at everyone on the bus and ask yourself, would I be able to have sex with them? Because that's who your clientele is, just everyday people, normal, everyday people. What else can I suggest?
Do you think that part of the reason that you're... because it'll follow you, do you think that's why a lot of people have a hard time getting out of the sex trade once they're in? That's
one of the reasons. Also, sex work happens to offer some of the highest pay. It's hard. Right now I'm making a very substantial salary on comparatively few hours. I'm making more now than I was when I was working, 40 to 60 hour weeks. And I'm, if I work, anywhere from 10 to 20 hours a week now. So I'm making more than double for less than half. It's hard to walk away from that.
Is there any way that somebody can get in contact with you if they want to look you up and maybe talk to you about some of the things that you brought up here on the show?
Oh, I advertise on several websites. Montreal Worldwide Escorts, MontrealCallGirls.com are two local websites that I advertise on. Excuse me a second. Sorry about that.
No problem. And when they visit those websites, they just have to do a search for...
Ronnie. RONNIE. You could email me directly at purplephoenix@simpatico.ca. I prefer that we chat by email first, and then I'll give you my phone number. It's preferable.
One last question before we wrap things up here. What are some of your future aspirations?
Tough question. Well, right now, escorting has allowed me to go back to school. I dropped out of university about 15 years ago. I was working full-time and going to school full-time, and it just wasn't working. I was burning myself out then. See a certain trend here, don't we? Mm-hmm. Something had to give, and the rent still needed to be paid, so I had to stop going to school. I always knew I would be going back, and escorting has allowed me to do that. Was last November I realized that I had a lot of free time. What did I want to do with it? And I went back to school. So I'd like to finish my bachelor's degree. I'm working on a bachelor's degree in psychology. After that, well, we'll have to wait and see.
Ronnie, thank you so much for coming down into studio here on Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles. Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles. Time to do the credits. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Ronnie NaughtyLady. Thank you so much for coming down into studio. And just very quickly, can you give us that email address and those websites where people can reach you?
You can email me at purplephoenix, PURPLEPHOENIX at simpatico.ca. I have some advertisings posted at montrealcallgirls.com, that's all one word, or montrealworldwideescorts.com.
Thank you, Ronnie. We're also saying thank you to Mr. Zoltan King, who's working the board and my right-hand man on this show. Thank you very much, Zoltan. Thanks all, and we'll see you here. Good night.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. What would your life be like if you knew exactly what to say and do with women? This book is for the guy that simply wants to learn how to handle women's tests by addressing her emotional needs. By this, you create the type of attraction that will make her see you as the one she was destined to be with. This book will teach you how to get the woman you want and how to keep her. Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test is the Rosetta Stone for men to understand exactly what a woman means when she speaks and how to respond. Is that worth changing your life forever? Buy this book at franktalks.com now.
This program does not represent the views of this station and may be considered offensive to some listeners. This program may contain mature subject matter, including frank discussions of controversial topics. It is intended for mature, open-minded audiences. Discretion is highly advised. This program is entirely independently produced by and is copyrighted by Frank. It is broadcast here under license.
You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles. And I'm Frank because I have to be. We have part 2 of our interview with Ronnie NaughtyLady, a professional escort. She's been great enough to come back to our studio.
I heard that my first interview generated a lot of interest, and it's a pleasure to participate in part 2.
And a lot of interest it was when people found out that I had interviewed a professional escort. The questions were incredible. They couldn't get enough of you, and I've had to start handing out CD copies of your first interview to people who really just wanted to sit down and listen to that show. So you've become a mini celebrity here on Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles, and it's wonderful you're back. You are the very first person to come back in studio.
Woohoo!
So Ronnie, you're my first. And given the
There's
nature,
so much that I could say in response to that. I think I'll just smile knowingly and bat my eyelashes.
oh yes, and you do that so well. And without further ado, let's get back to the interview. Ronnie NaughtyLady. One of the things that we normally do in the first 10 minutes of the interview segment to just go over again a little bit about your past, similar to what we had discussed the last time. Just so, again, we can reestablish our audience and get them familiar with you again. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, it's time to get reacquainted with the lovely Ronnie NaughtyLady. Ronnie, why don't we start off again where you were born, how you grew up, and the events in your life which eventually took you to the world of professional escorts.
In other words, what's a nice, intelligent girl like me doing with a career like this?
I'm sure some people out there might be using that type of vocabulary, but if it helps put you in the right frame of mind, okay.
Well, I was born here in Montreal, grew up here. As I stated on the previous show, my parents divorced while I was in elementary school, just like most of my friends. I graduated from CEGEP, had a selling career. I was doing quite well, was making a significantly higher than average income. I was making about $50,000 a year. And I suffered a very severe burnout. And I went on unemployment insurance, and the unemployment insurance ran out, and I was in no physical, mental shape to go back to work. I was still fried. And I applied for welfare, but I quickly realized that there was much too much month at the end of the money, and that just added to my stress levels. So I went and tried to find work. I got fired from 4 jobs in 1 year. Bosses, as I said last time, they just don't understand the need for afternoon naps. After working on and off for that year, I was eligible for unemployment again. I went back on unemployment insurance. Again, as my last weeks were approaching, I still wasn't well. I still wasn't in a physical or mental state to be able to handle working a regular full-time job. So I started looking at alternative types of employment. I accepted a job working on the internet in a studio doing live sex chat. And while I was doing that, I found a book called A Guide to Sex Work for the Interested and Intrigued, which I bought because of the chapter on the internet. But when I read it, there was a chapter on escorting, which broke a few myths and started me thinking, I could do that. And so I called a few agencies. I started working for agencies for a few months. And then I decided to go on my own and work. I've been working independently ever since.
And just to reiterate, this is something we discussed in our first show. What are some of the main differences between the internet sex chats and when you're working person in person as a professional escort?
The first thing that I noticed personally was that I get treated with a lot more respect as an escort than I ever did online. Maybe it's the anonymity of the men who would log on that made them feel that they didn't have to treat me respectfully. Or possibly was the fact that I was just an image on a computer screen. I wasn't flesh and blood. Could have been a combination of that. Could have just been that it attracts a different clientele. I'm really not sure as to the reasons why, but as an escort, I get treated with a lot more respect. That is first and foremost.
You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles. We're in studio today with Ronnie NaughtyLady. So hold on to your hats because we'll be right back after this.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. Ladies, do you want the man in your life to understand you on your level? Do you want your man to be able to listen to and address all of your emotional needs? Show him how much you really want your relationship to be the best it can be. Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test makes a perfect gift. The book, written by a man, for men, is endorsed by every woman that reads it. This book is a guide for men to understand exactly what a woman means when she speaks. Is that worth changing your life forever? Buy this book at franktalks.com now.
From Loser to Seducer is the story of Frank B. Kermit. This book marks the triumph of a nice guy over most of his inner demons. This includes going from being a loser to managing 5 lovers at the same time, his first Valentine's date with 2 women at the same time, and getting back the one that got away. Want to learn how you can change your life? Buy this book at franktalks.com.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the book I'm a Man, That's My Job, The Philosophy of a Seducer. Ladies, have you ever wondered where all the real men have gone? Do you turn to your women friends because you cannot find a true man in your life? Do you want the man in your life to step up and know what it means to be a man that can make you feel like the woman that you are? Are you tired of mothering the men you date? Give these boys the gift of manhood. The book, I'm a Man, That's My Job, teaches men to create their own seduction persona, personal inner game, and how to take the lead in a relationship. Buy this book now at franktalks.com.
You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles. And I'm Frank because I have to be. We're continuing with our interview with the lovely Ronnie NaughtyLady, a professional escort. She's here in studio. And I hold here in my hand here, Ronnie, a little booklet that looks like a manual in both English and French called Dear Client. And it's a book on sex work, specifically for the client of sex workers. I'm going to read a couple of passages just so our listeners here can get an idea. Dear Client, this guide was written for you, a client of sex workers. It was produced under the direction of Stella by a group of people working in the sex industry. The advice in this guide does not attempt to influence you to commit illegal acts or to do things that could harm your health or that of another. We simply hope that reading this guide will help you have a pleasant, sexy, respectful, and safe experiences with a sex worker. Now, this booklet, what was your role with this particular booklet?
Well, I was on the committee which helped decide what to include in it, what was important. Part of the brainstorming. That was pretty well it. Helped come up with ideas what should be in there. Some important things like the question and answer part, what type of questions and assumptions people have, and how to answer, stuff like that.
And is this the only branch from your work of being a professional escort? Or are there other things that you do, any sort of charity work?
Well, I try to be active with Stella. Stella is a group for sex workers, run by sex workers and ex-sex workers. Sex workers include streetwalkers, escorts, erotic masseuses or erotic massage, dancers, whatever, the full gamma, the full range. 1 second, please. Sorry about that.
No problem.
And we thought Pristella had received a grant from Health Canada to do something in the form of STD prevention. And we thought that was kind of narrow. So we broadened it to what eventually became the client guide. Because a pamphlet just on STDs is kind of boring.
How could someone get a hold of the client guide?
Any sex worker who's connected to Stella should have copies. However, they can email Stella at Stella PPP, that's STELLAPPP at videotron.ca. Or they can go to the Stella website, www.sheastella.org. They can also call at 285-8889.
Now, let's turn our attention here to an article you wrote about burnout. Prior to getting into the sex trade, you had experienced a burnout yourself.
Yes, I did.
In a magazine also put out by the Stella organization, you submitted an article on burnout. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I had a very bad burnout after working in the sales industry, but I wrote this article more specifically on sex worker burnout. Why sex worker burnout? While doctors and police officers, sales representatives, mothers, and just about anyone else who might have a burnout has many places to turn to for assistance, as a sex worker, one too often hears something to the effect of, well, quit. That kind of work isn't good for anyone. No wonder why you're burnt out. You're selling your soul. And that isn't helping. You know, someone in the sex trade needs just as much support as someone in any other trade who's experiencing a burnout. I did an awful lot of research online and actually in some of my psychology books. It is what I'm studying at school, and put this article together.
Now, just to reiterate one of the points you had made, burnout is not something specific to sex workers. It's something that's across the board.
Anybody can have a burnout. A burnout occurs when one's stress level exceeds one's coping abilities over an extended period of time. It's not feeling burnt out, or as people sometimes use the word, for a few days or after a rough week or an intensive week of which you can recuperate after a couple of days. It's something which goes on for months, even years. It tends to be a downward spiral. Burnout normally occurs very slowly. Gradually, you find yourself losing energy. And most importantly, it's not being acknowledged. You keep hoping things will be getting better, but in fact, they're going more and more downhill. You're feeling tired and chronically fatigued. You might feel empty inside or depressed. Your overall productivity level just keeps going down. You might be feeling an increasing lack of control over your commitments, an increased tendency towards negative thinking, and it does spiral downwards.
On this particular topic, prior to the show, we had a chance to talk about how one of the obstacles that you face as a professional escort is that when professional escorts do experience burnout or other unpleasant situations, there seems to be a lot of blame that goes around, whereas someone in another profession wouldn't be on the receiving end of that blame. Because this is so taboo.
Yeah, that's one of the things why sex workers really need to learn how to take care of themselves. The first thing is a lot of people think, well, if I was stronger, if I wasn't this, if I wasn't that, I could pull myself out of it. I can. But the first thing I think that needs to be recognized is not a person's personality to blame. It's normally the circumstances around them. Because one's coping abilities I don't care who you are, could only reach a certain maximum level. And once the stress levels exceed that, you're heading for burnout unless you do something about it.
Do you have any recommendations as to what someone can do for themselves in order to either avoid a burnout or how to get out of a burnout?
A good thing to do is, this actually would go for anybody who works at home also, is keep your home and your work life separate. For example, a dancer who works at a place and all the decor is red and gold, don't use the same colors at home. Paint in ivory and use blue, for example. Just make it different. Or if you work at home, invest in a second comforter. Different colors completely. Hang scarves over your lamps to make change the lighting. Or if you like candles, use only a particular scent when you're working. Or incense for that matter. Use different music for working and not working. Throw a blanket over your furniture to change the texture. Minor changes that appeal to all the five senses can make a dramatic difference in how a room feels. And other important tips, dress differently. When you're wearing your work clothes, you're performing. It could be expensive to have a second wardrobe, but you can start, very slowly, very basic things. You don't want to be seen at the local pool in the same bikini that you wore to dance in. One thing I do is I try not to wear slacks or pants on a date. For me, that means I'm not working. There are some exceptions when it's minus 40 degrees. It's a bit chilly to wear a skirt, but for the most part, that's something that I do. And the clothes that I do wear on a date, they're just for work. Another thing that stresses a lot of sex workers is they lead a double life. They're keeping secrets. Nobody knows what they do for a living. It's hard enough keeping secrets around strangers, but it's nearly impossible among close friends and family. And while you can't choose your family, you do choose your friends. And sorry about that. We all need friends to support us. And your friend might have, for example, might take a job working at McDonald's, which you might happen to think is the lowest form of work out there. You're not going to turn your back on her. So if you have a friend who might not approve of your work, she's not, and she turns her back on you for that, she was never your friend to begin with. You don't need people like that in your life. I was actually kind of surprised. I've come out to everyone in my personal circles, and I was surprised. I've yet to be rejected. Mind you, I've always been very tolerant and open-minded, and people who are alike tend to attract like-minded people, so that probably has something to do with it. But then it probably goes for other working girls also.
And I'm sure that part of that also is that you chose well when you chose your friends initially.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
We're going to be going to another break and some music. But before we go, I have one last question for you, if we can just wrap up this thought quickly. Prior to the interview, you had talked about how in your job previous to sex work, you were in sales.
Yes, I had been in sales ever since high school.
And now you're comparing it to your work as a professional escort. What is it that you say to people who comment on the fact that now in their current work, you're selling your soul?
No. In sales, I was being asked to sell my soul. In sales, every boss I had, their attitude was get the sale no matter what. It was a lot of pressure. It was do what you need to do. If I had to sell my soul to the devil, they didn't care. This is probably one of the most honest jobs I've ever had.
You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles. We're talking with the lovely Ronnie NaughtyLady, a professional escort. So stay tuned. When we come back, Ronnie's going to tell us some special client stories, and you don't want to miss this next segment. And we'll be back right after this.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the Adult Male Virgin Seminar and Telephone Consultations. Ladies, is your boyfriend an adult male virgin? Is he so shy and insecure that you need to take the initiative, but you really wish he would just be the man and take the lead? Does he think holding hands and sweet cheek kisses is fulfilling? Does he think the G-Spot is the name of a new club? Ladies, if his idea of a night of fun means you get to be player number 2 in his latest video game, then get him the gift that will give you both pleasure. The Adult Male Virgin Seminar and Telephone Consultations. Only available at franktalks.com. Frank helps adult boys become men.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the Calibrated Storytelling Seminar. Have you ever felt tongue-tied when talking to a woman and did not know what to say next? This seminar provides the structure to create personalized stories that connect to a woman's emotional needs. Calibration is about putting people into the categories and then modifying your behavior. Do you want to learn how to be truthful about who you are, but in an interesting and seductive way? If you want women to like you for the real you, then this seminar is for you. The Calibrated Storytelling Seminars and Telephone Consultations, only available at franktalks.com.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the Personalized Symbolic Peacocking Seminar. Guys, do you think that your father has a great sense of style? Are blue jeans and a clean t-shirt your idea of dressy? Then you need the Personalized Symbolic Peacocking Seminar. Does 1982 live in your closet? Do you own clothes that have more holes in them than a slice of Swiss cheese? Then you need the Personalized Symbolic Peacocking Seminar. Look at the contents of your closet. If you think that navy blue and dark green are your colorful clothes, then you need the Personalized Symbolic Peacocking Seminar. When you pick up your date for that night out on the town, does she cringe at your wardrobe? If you think that ladies might wonder if you're colorblind, or if your girlfriend has to remind you to wear a clean item of clothing, then you definitely need the Personalized Symbolic Peacocking Seminar. The Personalized Symbolic Peacocking Seminar and telephone consultations, only available at franktalks.com.
You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles. And I'm Frank because I have to be. We're going into the third and final segment of our interview with the lovely Ronnie NaughtyLady professional escort. So, Ronnie, let's start off by asking a few very generic business questions. When you do meet up with a client, what are the units of hours that they can purchase to spend time with you?
My minimum is 1 hour, though that is really quite rare. Most of my dates are 2 hours and up. I will make special rates for 6 hours, 12 hours, an overnight, a full day, or a weekend.
A weekend being Saturday and Sunday?
Friday evening to Monday morning. Well, some people, it doesn't work. It has to be till Sunday night, but I don't mind starting with supper Friday evening and going till breakfast Monday morning.
Now, to answer some questions that I've been asked about what you do, just some very quick questions here. Have you ever had a woman client?
In terms of couples, yes. I've never had a request from a single woman who wanted my time, but in couples it's happened more than once. A lot of times it was the woman who was interested and the man finding a way to fulfill her fantasy.
Has there ever been a situation where you were servicing a group of people as opposed to just a one-on-one situation?
It's happened. One of the more interesting times I was with, I got a phone call to go see a gentleman, and when I got there, there was already another woman there, another escort. While we were there, he had called another escort to come who was a transsexual. And also he called another man. And then I had left, just before I was leaving, another man showed up. So he was planning his own little orgy there. He was, I guess he had this fantasy in his mind, and he was planning it, making it come true.
Have you ever been hired by a cross-dresser?
No.
And a one-on-one with a transsexual?
Not in my professional life.
And with that, we're going to move on to the next line of questioning. Thank you so much for your honesty, Ronnie. Thank you very much for that. It was great. Let's talk about some of your special clients and special stories that you'd like to share with us.
Okay. Well, we can start with, it was Christmas. It was in between Christmas and New Year's. And I was invited over to see somebody, and we had a nice little date, and we had a lot of fun. And I was starting to get dressed to leave, and I had said something to the effect that I hoped he had had a wonderful Christmas, and I wished him all the best for the new year. And at that, I looked at him, and there were tears running down his face. And it turns out that he had just lost his mother a few months ago, his father a couple of years ago, and his only two siblings were 3,000 or 6,000 miles away, and there's just no way that for him to be able to be together with any family at Christmas time. And it was his first Christmas he had ever spent all alone. And
was he married? Did he have children?
Divorced.
Divorced.
And those words just triggered something in him, and all the pain and the loneliness and the heartache and the fact that he missed his parents. The man was about 40 years old, and all the pain that he had been holding inside just started pouring out. And I couldn't leave him like that. It's I'm human, and he's human, and people shouldn't treat each other like that and just, it's business, I gotta go now, bye. I couldn't do that. It's just not in my nature. And so I stayed, and he, I had him lying down with his head in my lap, and I was just sort of stroking his hair and just encouraging him to let it out. And I actually had turned down, canceled the rest of my work for the rest of the night, because it was obvious I had somebody here who needed me right now. And he kept telling me that he couldn't afford to keep me all night. And I said, we'll worry about that later. Right now you need me. And finally, when things were fine, and he would, it was over, and he's in a good mood, and it was several hours later, and again he's saying, look, I kept telling you to leave because I really don't have that much money, and I can't, this is way more than what I budgeted for. And I told him to just, do whatever you can, and I understand you have your budget, you have your limits, and just do whatever you think you can and whatever you think is fair. And it was less than I would have normally made for that many hours, but I don't feel bad about that. I feel good about that, because it was more important to take care of him in an hour of need.
This brings up a very good point, and that is, and you've told me this before in our previous interview, about the type of relationship you develop with your clients. You get very involved in their minds, in their hearts, in their lives. You develop real caring friendships with them.
Yes, I have several clients I see on quite a regular basis. There's one young man who I see quite regularly. He's a normal-looking guy, just normal guy you see on the street. Not especially bad-looking, not especially good-looking, just your average Joe. And I see him quite regularly. And he once confessed to me that I was the only person who holds him. And I was very touched by that. And it made me reflect on what a crazy world we live in, whereas touch is such a basic human need, and yet I'm the only person who holds him. I found that really, it struck a nerve. I also felt quite flattered in a way that I'm the one who was chosen. And that made me feel special, because he's a really, really great guy. He's smart and intelligent and funny, and the only thing, the reason which I could imagine that is keeping him single is the fact that he's shy.
I've often heard that professional escorts and other women in the sex trade actually save more marriages than they would ever destroy. And I'd like to get your thoughts on it, and these will have to be our final thoughts for the day. We're coming to the end of Frank Talks. So what's your position on sex workers as marriage counselors?
I think I'll tell you a story of another client. This gentleman, I've only seen him a couple of times, The first time we got together, after it was over and we're just lying there, I pulled out a static duster. And I started just gently brushing his body with it. And, after orgasm, the whole body becomes very sensitive. All the nerves are like electric. And he obviously very much enjoyed it. It was very relaxing and just felt good. And maybe 2 months later, I get a phone call from him, and he says, "I have to see you again." And it's like, "Have to?" He says, "I'll explain when I see you." And when we got together, he explained that he had used my trick on his wife, and it put that spark back into, I think it was a 15-year marriage, that it had gone boring, their sex life. And that my little trick had put a spark back into their sex life. And what he wanted to do was pick my brain for more simple ideas, because if he had ever pulled out something that you would buy in a sex shop, she would have been intimidated and scared off by it. But the fact that I pulled out a household item just made it all that much more fun, and, it very much added to his home life. And so he picked my brain for all sorts of ideas. And I think he came one more time for, again, just mostly picking my brain for ideas, and that was it. And basically he said I put the spark back in his relationship. One other married client, he was talking about how his relationship with his wife, and I suggested to him to, next time that he gets home and his wife calls to say she's on her way home and that she's had a bad day, that he should, I suggested to him to either cook supper or order supper, and that he should make the table and use the nice tablecloth and use the good dishes and put candles out, maybe buy her some flowers, run the bathtub with bubble bath and put all candles in the bathroom, and to have a nice glass of her favorite wine sitting in the bathroom waiting for her. And when she gets home, tell her that she's going to smell that supper's ready, that you've cooked supper. And you're going to tell her that she has a nice bubble bath waiting for her before supper. I told him to let her soak for a while, have her glass of wine first, and then go and wash her. Wash her the way you would wash somebody who's a friend who's injured. So you would do it gently and kindly and tenderly, but not sexually. Because when you're stressed out after a day of work, sex is not what you really want. You want tenderness. And people have this bad habit, especially in couples, of touch and tenderness means I want sex, when often it just means I want touch and tenderness. And if she wants more, she'll let you know. But don't. Just, massage her shoulders, rub her legs. Let her, you should be dressed in clothes that you know she thinks you look good in. But you tell her when she's coming out of her bath to get dressed in her most comfortable clothes. And if that means a pair of old sweatpants and a big old sweatshirt, or her fuzzy bunny slippers, doesn't matter. She should be dressed in her favorite comfortable clothes. And then when you serve supper, you serve supper. Don't let her serve supper. You do all the dishes after. You clear the table. And if you have kids, ship them off to your in-laws. And you just gave her a little mini vacation in the middle of the week.
Essentially, you relieved her of responsibility.
Exactly. And the next time I saw him, he told me that it worked like a miracle. And she asked, why, what happened? Why are you doing this? It was like kind of weird on him. And he said, he told me his answer. He was very proud of it. He answered, because I realized you deserved it, which I thought was a really sweet answer. And the next time I saw him, it was again, he was picking my mind for more ideas on how to treat his home life. So, yeah, I think there are a lot of instances where I've actually saved the marriage.
And one final thought before we go, and for those of you who are used to hearing our People of the Week segment around this time, we are preempting that segment so we can get a few more questions in with Ronnie NaughtyLady. One last comment or question is the nature of your relationships with some of your clients is not necessarily all sexual. Have you ever had clients where you simply did not have sex with them?
Actually, one of my Christmas Eve clients, I went over there and we were sitting on the couch, all cuddly cozy. He had actually hors d'oeuvres set out for me, and there was a Christmas tree and there was some wine, and we were just sitting there cuddly cozy and talking. And I thought he was being shy, so I suggested we take a bath together. Trying to break the ice. But even when we took the bath, there was no sex. He just wanted somebody there to hold him, and he certainly enjoyed when I massaged his back with the bar of soap. But it was really, he did not want sex. He wanted to be held. He wanted to talk. And that's just one example. One example in specific that stands out in my mind because I thought the hors d'oeuvres and the wine was kind of sweet.
Come to the end of our program, unfortunately. Ronnie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here.
It goes really fast.
Oh, it does. And again, thank you so much for coming by. It's always a pleasure here on Frank Talks to interview you. And here on Frank Talks, we look forward to interviewing people in the sex trade. And we've just run out of time. Anything goes here on Frank Talks, Pleasures and Lifestyles. Good night, everybody. Whatever you love.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. Ladies, does your man squash your inner vixen? When you ask him to repeat what you have just said to him, does he look at you like a deer caught in the headlights? Does he think that leaving the game on while you talk to him is a good idea? Is his favorite phrase, "Yes, dear, you are absolutely right"? Does wife or girlfriend mean boring and dull to him? Ladies, don't you wish that he knows what you mean when you ask him if you look fat? Then you need to buy him the book, Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. On sale now at franktalks.com.
Need help with love, sex, dating, or relationship issues? Help from Frank Kermit, the best-selling author and Canada's most international relationship coach, is only a click away at franktalks.com.
Need help with love, sex, dating, and relationships? Visit franktalks.com.
If you need help with your relationships, my buddy Frank, he's got some tips. Just go to franktalks.com. His advice is better than your mom's. He knows what you're going through, 'cause Frank has been there too. So log on to franktalks.com. franktalks.com.
What do you do when you feel like a fool? When your heart has been broken again? Pick up the phone or get onto Skype and talk on a private session. Yeah, get a little help from Frank Talks. Whoa, whoa, get by with a little help from Frank Talks. You gotta try a little help from Frank Talks. What do you do when your love goes away? Try coaching one-on-one. How do I sign up to turn things around? Just sign up at franktalks.com. Yeah, get by with help from Frank Talks. I get by with little help from Frank Talks. Time to try a little help from Frank Talks. Does it cost a lot of money? It's the best rate going around. Could it cost a lot of money? Oh, it's worth every cent that you will put down. Yeah. FrankTalks.com. Oh, you got to go to FrankTalks.com. Get your help from FrankTalks.com. Yeah, yeah. FrankTalks.com. Would you believe that Frank gets results? Yes, we're certain. Just read the reviews. Frank knows his stuff, and Frank's got the goods. Good love can soon come to you.